This podcast is sponsored by nobody. Hey dudes, welcome to Splat from the Past, the only 80s themed horror sci-fi show where things can get totally radical. Now today I will be welcoming Meegan King. Meegan, aside from the fact that he's the father of legendary character actor Wright King, who was in Planet of the Apes, Invasion of the Bee Girls, he did a lot of TV westerns and so forth. Meegan was in the 1978 cult classic Sweater Girls, celebrating its 45th anniversary. He'll be my second guest from that movie, but the first who's actually willing to talk about it. He was also in Cruisin High, a movie that I watched the first time the other night that was actually pretty good. It's a nice little, gang-related teen drama from 1976. He was also in the Roger Corman classic Jaws ripoff, Humanoids From the Deep. Well, it's kind of like a Jaws ripoff. I shouldn't go that far. He guest starred on so many great shows, like the Waltons, Starsky and Hutch, Mary Tyler Moore Show, The Secrets of Isis, Barnaby Jones. And he later got behind the camera and working behind the scenes. He worked on the reboot of Muppets Tonight in the 90s in the art department. And we're going to talk about all of that stuff today, and I can't wait. I talked to him on the phone last week, unrecorded, and he's a really nice guy, so I'm going to enjoy this conversation today. So yeah, here is my interview with Meegan King.
Hello.
Hey, Meegan, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm good. Tommy, how you doing?
I am spectacular. This is such a great honor. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you.
So, going back in time, you were, of course, the son of character actor Wright King, who, by the way, after you told me about him when we were talking on the phone a week or two ago, I looked him up. I actually remembered he was Dr. Gallon in Planet of the Apes and Dr. Merger in Invasion of the Bee Girls.
Oh my God, you remember the Bee Girls?
Oh, yes. I've been trying to get a guest from that movie for a long time, and I can't. Like, all the girls are, ashamed of it.
Wow, is that Angel Tompkins in that? I can't remember.
Yeah, oh, God, Beverly Sanders, couple people, yeah.
Yeah, they don't, yeah. Okay, well, whatever. William Smith died, didn't he?
Yeah. So I can imagine it was only natural that you were going to go down that path of acting as well.
It wasn't, no. You know what? It just kind of happened. Yeah, I was going to send you a picture of when we were kids. Dennis Weaver was directing a
Gunsmoke.
Who was a friend of the family. Yeah, he directed a Gunsmoke that we were all in.
Right.
And I looked at it, and yeah, man, I see the film on that, and it's like there's no destiny in it for me at all. It was like I was totally lost as a 6-year-old on a set. I don't know how kids act on sets. It's never made sense to me. I would never have been a natural for any of that stuff. My brother Michael acted in high school, and he was quite good. Mm-hmm. And I acted in high school and really liked it. That's where I got the bug. And I didn't want my dad's influence in it. My brother would get him to direct scenes and stuff for the festivals that we had. I didn't want him to do it. I just wanted to do this stuff on my own. I didn't want to go down his path. I just wanted my path. Right. But did you do any school plays or community theater or any of that stuff? All over the place. Yeah. I mean, I did a million musicals, and I did a production of West Side Story with Stephanie Kramer.
Wow.
She played Tony, and she played Maria. And Kevin Spacey, who was Kevin Fowler at the time, was one of our backstage hands. That's how long ago that was. Wow.
God, that's crazy. That's crazy. You're in there with Hunter, with the girl from Hunter, and then Kevin Spacey, Academy Award winner, who's controversial now. Wow, that is just mind-boggling.
Yeah, well, that was the Valley. While I was growing up, I went to school with, Charlie Martin Smith, and Don Stark and Mayor Winningham and Don Petrie, and you couldn't. It's a company town, so
Yeah.
you know a lot of people along the way. It's not that big a town.
Yeah, well, at least back then it wasn't. I mean, there was no internet. Everyone kind of hung out more and knew each other. Now it's like everyone's divided because of the internet.
You know, yeah, we have problems on the internet. It's brought out a whole different animal of humanity, I guess.
I agree, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, when you were on that set of Gunsmoke at what 6, 7 years old, I mean, did you feel like, oh my God, this is pretty cool?
You know, it was amazing. It was the same place, the exact same spot that I shot The Quest with Kurt Russell years later out in Thousand Oaks, is where they did the exterior of the thing. And I just remember us, because it was a phony set out there, they opened up the door and there was no interior set. That was for the studio the next day. But when we were out there in Thousand Oaks, they opened up and they just threw us all into a tiny little room. And we were in this room with James Arness, who was, I was small at 5 or 6 years old, but he was ginormous. He really was 6'6", 6'7".
Oh yeah.
I just remember how big he was. Very sweet guy.
Oh, absolutely. Was that? Well, I'm trying to remember. Was that at Universal Review Studios?
We didn't shoot it at. I think we shot it at CBS Radford.
Okay.
Actually. Yeah, I think it was a CBS show.
Yeah, that's the one that's not there anymore, right?
No, it's there. It's there. It's where they film. What's the thing with all the where they put all the kids in a house together? What's the name of that show? I can't remember. It's a reality show. They're doing reality shows out of there now.
You stumped me there. I don't watch reality TV.
Yeah, I don't either. I'm kind of gone with that. So.
Yeah, because there was talk pre-pandemic that CBS over there was going to close down. That was bots, but I guess they decided not to do it or something.
Well, somebody bought it because they used to do fireworks every 4th of July there, and you could go. You could either go and have the VIP seats in the studio, or you could go down to the LA River, and they would shoot the fireworks right over your head. But whoever bought it stopped doing the fireworks. We don't get to see that anymore.
Yeah. Now I'm trying to remember, like, after high school, did you study at the Strasberg Institute or something like that?
I studied everywhere. I studied with Stella Adler for a year. I studied with Udo Hagen for about 6 months. Jeff Corey, Sandy Meisner, Herbert Berghoff. You know what? They were all the great acting teachers of the time, and I had a way in. That was the good thing about being my father's son, was that everybody knew who he was, and I was like, I could step into any one of those places. It was nice. Yeah.
What was Jeff Corey like?
Bombastic. He was he kind of rude. Kind of rude. You do something for him. He said, "Why'd you do that?" It's like, come on, man. This is the place. I did something from the 30s that was pretty dated, and he said, "Well, what'd you do that for here?" And I said, "Well, because where else am I going to do it?" He said, "Oh, well, whatever. It's a dated old piece. Nobody should ever do it." It was a great piece by Maxwell Anderson. It's like, whatever. But I also studied with him at Northridge a little bit, and I was in the class with Frank Doubleday, Portia Doubleday's father, and Frank was very subtle, and he'd sit back in the class, and we were about 5 weeks into the class, and somebody was doing a scene from Barefoot in the Park, and they were having a kind of a tough time, and Jeff stopped him, and he said, "Well, I don't know, honey, do these newlyweds, do they have sex?" She said, "Yeah, we're newlyweds." And he said, "What color do you see when you come?" I mean, it's like, it was just rude. He was just rude. And Frank Doubleday went, ha! He was he was audible. And Jeff Corey said, so, oh, hey, you, fella. I don't know you. You know, I see you here in class, but I never see you doing anything. I mean, what kind of an observer are you? And he said, well, you're wearing one brown sock and one blue sock. And he got up and he left. That was Frank Doubleday to Jeff Corey.
Oh, that is pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he taught Jack Nicholson and Harry Dean Stanton and Roger Corman when he was taking the class. Yeah.
Yeah, they
Sally
were all
Kellerman.
part of him.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, but he was the dude. He was smart too, and he had good things to say. But all you remember is that he was a dick.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. His daughter's around. I'm sorry. I don't mean to say that, but I think she still runs the Jeff Corey Institute. I don't know. I think there is one.
I don't know. I'd have to find that out. But yeah. Maybe she knows. You know.
I'm sure she does.
So who were your classmates in a lot of these classes?
Well, you know, I was with Don Petrie in a couple of classes. He's the guy who directed Mystic Pizza and a bunch of stuff.
Grumpy
his
Old
father
Men.
was a director before Grumpy Old Men, and his father was a director before him, Dan Petrie.
Yeah.
And nothing could have been different between these two guys. Dan Petrie was about 5'3", and Don Petrie was about 6'5". It's like that was father and son. I never saw such a disparity between. But Don, good guy, and he goes back and he teaches at Northridge still from time to time. You know what? I was at school with Danny Bonaducci's brother.
Yeah.
And we were doing a show together, and his mother came. John said, "Oh, hey, my brother's going to be coming to the show. You got to watch out for him." I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, he's apt to, right in the middle of the show, turn around in the audience and take a look around at people." And I said, "You tell him he does that, and I'm going to kick it, whatever." And anyway, I got through the show, and John came up to me about 6 months later and said, "Look, you were talking about wanting to get into the business. You want a good agent or anything?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "My mother's an agent. She liked you in that last show we were in. You want to go see her?" And so I was in my second year in Northridge, and I started working.
Nice. So
I missed a lot of the class. I mean, I did 5 shows with Charlie Smith, and did a lot of stuff with Don Stark. I don't know if you know who he is. He's from the 70s show, and I just grew up with all these people. It was like, it was great. It was weird going into show. It's the stage is so completely different than acting on film, and on stage, the idea is that you get to work out and you get to develop a character. Mm-hmm. And for television and movies, you better come prepared. You better come with a bag of tricks.
Yeah.
You better have all your crap together, because if you don't, you're kind of lost on a set. And you learn that after the first time you're on a set. But nothing can brace you for that first day. I remember the first thing that I did, where I was actually working, was a thing called Sons and Daughters, and it looked like the other side of the moon on a set. It just did not look like a reality at all. And then I didn't have that great a part, so the interest wasn't on me, so I could watch what was going on. But the next thing that I did was a good thing. I did that Planet of the Apes when it was a TV show.
Yeah, it's funny.
And,
I love the movies. I watched them over and over again as a kid, but I never saw the series. But I'm curious to know, was it a good environment? Was it a good set?
Yeah, it was a great set. Roddy McDowall was on the set, and they'd finally gotten his makeup down. He used to be in makeup for 5 hours at a time, and they finally got his makeup down when they did the TV show to about 2.5 hours. But man, that makeup got to be tough on his skin, man. That was crazy. every day.
Oh, that's so cool.
I loved it. We shot that out at the Fox Ranch.
Yeah.
And that's where they shot MASH and a lot of other stuff. And it was a great working environment. And all the actors were pretty interesting. Jim Naughton was on it.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you know who he is. Yeah. And I mean, it was a great set. I really enjoyed it, and it was a good way. It was the first good part that I had. I went in for the casting on the thing, and it was called The Horse Race, and humans talked in the TV show, and it was like, what? What's that all about? I mean, because my dad was in the original Planet of the Apes, I thought myself the expert on Planet of the Apes, and so I went. I read the script, and it was about a human that rode horses, and humans weren't allowed to ride horses. And I went in, and the director said, Jack Sterrett. Jack Sterrett was a guy who played Gabby Johnson in Blazing Saddles.
Yeah.
And do you remember? Yeah. And he was the director on the thing. He said, "Can you ride a horse?" And I said, "Like the wind." And I had the part. That's how I got the part. And it was a good way to be inaugurated into a set. You try and work. That first year, I think I worked 3 or 4 different jobs and made very little money. So I Christmas time in '74, I was having to work at Penny's in Northridge selling shoes, and this guy walked in. I recognized him. He was in a movie that I'd seen the summer before, and I'm good with faces and names and stuff, and I knew nobody else would know who this guy was, but I thought I'd give him a charge, and I said, Sylvester Stallone. And this guy perked up. He was so excited. I was like the first person who had given him his due, outside of, working. He had just done Lords of Flatbush the year before.
Yeah.
And I said, I started selling him shoes, and I said, you're out here working? He said, yeah, I came out. He told me I did this thing, Death Race 5000 with David Carradine, and I did a couple of Kojaks, and I wrote a Kojak. And I said, you write? And he said, yeah. And then he told me the Rocky story.
Mm-hmm.
This is in like 1974.
Yeah.
And I said, wow, that, and it was amazing, just in his telling of it. And I said, so what's happening with that? And he said, well, we're shopping it around. My agent and I were shopping it around. I said, well, wow. He said, we've gotten some bites. Some people really want to do it. But I got a stipulation. I said, what's your stipulation? He said, I got a star in it. I said, yeah, what do you mean? They're producers that want somebody else to do it? And they said, oh yeah, they're talking Ryan O'Neal, and he had 3 or 4 other names that he was throwing out at the time. And I said, I remember him walking away, and me thinking, I said, good luck. And I really meant like, good luck, dude. It was like, and there it was. I'll tell you, I was the first guy in line to see Rocky, though. I was.
Wow.
He was. What a great career that is.
Oh yeah. And then you do the Mary Tyler Moore show. You play a photographer.
Yeah, that was fun. The real fun part of that was watching Betty White, who was hysterical.
Yep.
I'd never seen anybody funnier than Betty White, and she gave a line reading on something that they did not stop laughing in the audience for about 2.5 minutes. They cut it from the show. It took too long. But Carole King was on the show, and Carole King and I became friends for the 3 days that I was working on that. Mm-hmm. And it was like, she was a sweetheart. She was just in playing a secondary character in the thing.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow. It's like 75. It was only like 3 or 4 years after she had the biggest album in the world. And it was like, wow, that was exciting. And she and I got along nicely.
Yeah, I talked to Ed Asner before he died, about a year before he died, and that was great. I mean,
about that.
He was just a sharp fun guy. And I also talked to Joyce Bulifant. I don't know if she was on when you guest starred on that episode, but she was great too.
No, but I remember Joyce. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got to work with Cloris a couple of times, and she was the greatest busybody of all time. She was like, I was smoking cigarettes in the day, and she came around me one day where we were on a different set, and she said, "Oh, smoking cigarettes." She knew my dad. They'd been in classes together, and I said, yeah. And I put the cigarette out, and a couple of days later, I was smoking somewhere else, and she came behind me and she said, "Oh, smoking?" I said, "Yeah, I smoke. I smoke, Cloris. If you don't like it, don't stand around me." I had the brashness of a 20-year-old kid.
Yeah. Then you did a great episode of The Secrets of ISIS.
Oh my God! Yeah, with Brian Cutler
and Joanna Ping.
Brian Cutler.
Yeah.
That was a fun show, and Harry Gold, who was Missy Gold's father, and Tracy Gold's father, and he became an agent. He became their agent.
Wow, I remember the two of them. They were in the audience of this comedy special John Paragon did for Showtime, and he's playing this Latin lover character that's like hitting on all the women in the audience. And he said something to Tracy, who was like 12 or 13, you couldn't get away with today. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe her dad's allowing this, even though it's a joke,
Yeah. No, and Harry's a great guy, still is, and oh my God, those girls! She's 50 years. Oh my God, I can't get other people's ages.
I know, it's creepy.
It's creepy. I'm sorry. It's like, wow. But time goes so fast. It's like you have no idea, how fast it's going.
I know, right? Do you remember anything about Joanna Cameron?
She was a little standoffish.
I heard.
That's what I remember about her. Yeah. That's all I knew about her. She, you know what, you get a vibe from people. I've been around a lot of people, in the business, and you get a vibe from people. It's like you know who to stay away from. They're people that will say, "Hey, don't eyeball me." It's like, what? What? It's like, don't eyeball you. What are you, the Queen of Sheba? Jeez.
I know, it's like she was method acting.
Yeah, as ISIS, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, whatever. I don't know that she was all that schooled as an actress.
Yeah.
She just passed a couple of years ago, so.
Yeah, my friend who has a podcast, she was friends with her for 20 years, and she's the only one who was ever able to get her on a podcast and talk about, her journey and stuff. And she was very bitter, and she was just, blaming everybody else but her. It was sad. And
you can imagine being a pretty woman in the 70s was not the easiest thing in the world to do. I mean, there really was. I'm not saying a casting couch, but there was, and it's like a lot of women were taken advantage of.
Oh yes. Oh, we all know that. we found that out the last couple of years. It's sad. I watched
Go
ahead.
I'm listening to you.
Oh, sorry. I watched the episode of Barnaby Jones that you were in, and
oh Jesus, Jeff Conway. Yeah.
Jeff Conway. Oh my God, what a talented guy he was.
Yeah, he was. He was really standoffish on that show, and it was hard to get to know him. But I got to know him later on. We're friends.
Yeah, what was it like to work with Buddy Ebsen?
Buddy Ebsen was like, we were amazed. Buddy Ebsen was my age now, and Buddy Ebsen it's like you felt like they were standing him up there, and just they had something behind him standing him up, because he just seemed pretty rigid. It was like, he was kind of stiff. It was kind of stiff, and that's too bad, because I later on got to know his work, and wow,
yeah,
what great work he'd done. And I'm not talking Jed Clampett. I'm talking about all the early stuff that he'd done with like Shirley Temple, and
Oh yeah,
he was the original.
He was almost a Tin Man.
He was the original Tin Man. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
he was an old school conservative guy, you know, but he loved everybody, and he I just heard that he was just a great guy.
Yeah, I didn't really get to know him. You know, man, guy ate a hot dog on the set and walked away from me. That's, you know, I what do I know?
Do you remember anything about Cassie Yates? She was gorgeous.
You know what? Yes, but I don't remember her. I didn't get to know. I wasn't in any scenes with her.
Yeah, I remember her from Convoy with Chris Christopherson and Ally McGraw.
Yeah. I didn't know her, so I couldn't talk to her. But right about that time, I did the thing with Kurt Russell, the Quest.
Yeah.
And that was a fun one. He was a real scummy kind of character.
Yeah.
And so I remember I was going to Warner Brothers for a casting session on that thing, and I remember going to Forest Lawn and just rolling in the dirt there and going to the casting, you know, of that thing. And I got it, and it was like this great group of actors in this one scene: Gary Lockwood and Keenan Wynn and Ed O'Hare-Leahy, and we all had this. There was a round that we were, you know, having a spirited conversation together, the characters, and I was watching, and I loved Keenan Wynn. I had met him years before. My dad had worked with him, and I had great respect for him. But he dropped a line when we were in the master shot that we were doing, and I was always pretty good not to let the beat go too long, and I picked up on the line. He didn't pick it up, and he went through all the other people's close-ups and all that kind of stuff, and he and I were the last two, and he remembered the line when it was his close-up, and somebody, the script girl said, "Well, Keenan, you didn't say the line in the master," and he said, "I did too. The kid stepped on my line." It's like, well, whatever. You know, that was a fun one. I got to, you know, shoot the guns and have a good time and act with Kurt and Tim Matheson. That was fun.
Yeah, was that shot at you know, somewhere near L.A. in the ranch somewhere?
That also that was the one that was shot where we shot the Gunsmoke right out there in the hills of Thousand Oaks.
Yeah,
75 or 6 is when we shot that one. It was like, wow. I you know, you don't forget. Houses are on that land now, but it was the most beautiful land, you know, and you saw a million things. If you watched Westerns from the 50s and 60s, everything was shot out there.
Right. You starred in a ABC after-school special called Dear Lovey Heart. I mean, I'm Desperate.
Yeah, I got to. That's where I met my friend Alyssa Davalos.
Oh yeah, I reached out to her sister when I started this podcast because she's a musician, and I remember her when she was in Howard the Duck, and she was interested. She was interested for like a minute. I'm thinking about trying her again soon. It's been 6 years. Maybe she changed her mind because I saw her do a few podcasts recently.
Yeah, I don't know. Alyssa is a really private person, and she's, you know, but she was a good help to me. I'd done a one-man show. Things got kind of slow for me, so I started doing stage. And I wrote a one-man show, and I had this material, and I didn't know what I was going to do with it. And I was passing it around to some people, and I passed it to her. She's produced a couple of things. And I said, well, what do you think? Are you interested in it? She said, yeah, no, I'm not interested in it, but, you know, I have a great idea for you, and forget trying to film this on stage or anything like that. Go out, since all of these locations are local locations, and shoot on location. And it was like, it had never occurred to me. And I've since the pandemic began, I've been out shooting a couple of these monologues, and it's been great. I've got 32 3-minute pieces that I'm going to throw out as soon as the strike's over and see if they fly.
Nice.
I'm going to throw them out on the internet. I have no idea where they'll sell. I have no idea how that works, but I'll find out.
Yeah, it's funny. I watched this the other day, and back then when they were doing the after-school specials, they were talking about taboo subjects like shoplifting, drug and alcohol use, rape, teen pregnancy, but this was about the personals, and I'm thinking, what's the personals have to do with, like, a moral lesson, really, other than there's crazy people you meet sometimes?
Well, that's basically it. It's just crazy people that you meet sometimes. But that story was the moral: don't be messing in other people's business. Basically,
yeah.
Story was about. That's what the moral of it was. Yeah, I had a really great time on that. That was right before I started doing the B flicks. That's like right when that was happening.
Oh, so, yes. As a matter of fact, the other day I watched Cruisin High, and I had never seen it before.
Oh!
I liked it.
Well, it is the perfect B flick. That was so low budget that they the premise was that there was a white gang in Santa Maria.
Yeah.
Up the coast here, and it's in a totally Mexican part of California at the time, and all it was were Mexican gangs, and there was this one lone white gang in this area, and so some producer decided that he was going to do that. Pine Thomas decided they were going to do it, and so we went up and we shot in Santa Maria, and the extras that we used were all of the Mexican gangs.
Mm-hmm.
And they stomped the crap out of us while we were shooting the thing. All the white actors we're just actors. We're not gang members, and they were all pretty tough guys. They were pretty rough trade, and it was not fun. But it was so low budget that when we came back to town and we were shooting, we were in Glendale and shooting by the railroad tracks, and they had worked us for like 8 hours, and we hadn't had a break. We hadn't had a lunch break or anything like that. And they're duty bound by the union to give you a break after 5 hours. So nobody was saying anything. So I broke off, and I called Screen Actors Guild, and I said, "Hey, this is what's going on the set." And about 20 minutes later, the guy shows up on the set from Screen Actors Guild, and he says, "Meegan King, Meegan King." It's like, the producer sees me talking to the guy, and the guy goes over and talks to him. The producer gets a honey wagon out there, and they're making lunch for us, and they're just about to serve lunch. And the guy from Screen Actors Guild says, "Well, my work's been done here." He left, and as soon as he left, the guy closed the honey wagon, closed it. The honey wagon drove off, looked at me, and just went, "Uh-huh." Mm-hmm. Yeah. Get in trouble sometimes.
I liked the movie because it reminded me of Over the Edge with a little bit of Class of 1984 and a little bit of blaxploitation with the street pimp there.
Yes.
It had all those elements. Yes. Now, when you say it was low budget, what was the estimated budget, if you can remember?
Oh, $12. I have no idea. It was so low budget. I know that we were working SAG deferment on that, which meant that you got paid half your salary straight up, and they paid you when it came out to the made some money at the movies. And it never made any money, or never showed making any money. So we never got the second half of our checks.
Wow. Yeah, David Kyle, I remember him from Halloween. Yeah. He's like a Christian minister now or something. He won't do any of the Halloween reunions. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he's, David, I see him from time to time. But Daryl Morey was part of that whole deal. And
he's still working?
Still good. Yeah, he still works. And he did all of that Gary Marshall stuff. And he was in everything. He was in Joni Loves Chachi, and he was in one of the first Archies.
Steve Bond blocked me like a year ago.
Steve Bond, oh my God. Well, good. Not that he blocked you, but good to know that he's still out there. Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't seen him do anything in a while. So, but Daryl, I see working from time to time. He teaches kids how to act.
So. There was a young John Ashton playing the coach.
Yes, young John Ashton. That's right. It was like you never would have guessed that he was going to, go on to Beverly Hills Cop fame.
And Midnight Run.
It was like, yeah, I mean, he was great in Midnight Run.
Oh,
now that you mention that, working with those actors, he would be. Yeah, sometimes the actors bring you up. Sometimes they really bring your game up, and they made him look like a champ in that movie.
Doug McGrath, he later did Porky's and Pale Rider. Someone told me he got injured pretty badly on Pale Rider. Yeah,
I don't think he was able to work after Pale Rider, as a matter of fact. I think he wrecked one of his legs. Porky's. I remember seeing Porky's, and I had some friends in Porky's, Scott Columbian, and I remember seeing Porky's and going, I've been in 3 movies this bad.
Well, yeah, I mean, Sweater Girls, I mean, I love this movie. Was that like a standard audition for you?
Yeah, that was a standard audition, and it was like, I still see Harry Moses from time to time. He's a minister as well. I don't know what happens to these guys. They become ministers. But Harry Moses became a minister, and see Mike Goodrow from time to time. Who hit from? Well, Charlene is the one who really hit from that.
I had Charlene on, and I think she was looking at her IMDb. I think she knew I was going to bring it up. She tried to truncate the interview, but I wouldn't let her. And so I interjected and said, "What was it like hosting Saturday Night Live?" And we talked for another 20 minutes.
Yeah. No. There'd be no reason for her to want to talk about the Sweater Girls.
Yeah.
The Sweater Girls, when we started filming it, was called One Summer Day, which I was fine with. I didn't want to do a movie called The Sweater Girls. I mean, that's when they were doing, the cheerleaders and stuff like that. It was obvious exploitation. But, you're going to be an exploitation whether you know it, from time to time, if you're working low budget.
Yeah.
It's going to happen.
What was Noelle North like?
Oh, what a sweetheart! What a sweetheart! She went on to fame as the one of the Smurfs, didn't she?
She did that. She did a lot of voices, and then there's some videos on YouTube of her doing some awful things in Scientology. Unfortunately, yeah.
Oh, a very sweet girl. I remember.
Yeah,
and funny, really funny.
Yeah, she's very talented. It was pitched as an American Graffiti, but with nudity.
Yeah, well, a friend of mine, we saw it at the New Beverly Cinema, Tarantino's place down here, and a couple of years ago, and a friend of mine said, not a terrible movie, a little rapey for me, but terrible.
That's how it was back then.
It's right. It is. That's what exploitation was about. It's like, okay. So the next one is Humanoids from the Deep, and there's the exploitation of all time.
Oh yeah.
I read for something that was not called Humanoids from the Deep.
Right.
And I know Vic Morrow didn't read for Humanoids of the Deep, and believe me, it wasn't called Humanoids from the Deep while we were filming it.
I'm sure.
But as soon as and that was Roger Corman low budget, and that was like it was amazing. They just had us, Lynn Thiel and I and Denise Galick were on the beach, and we went up to, it's up north where you are. It's actually, what's the name of the place? Fort Bragg. We were in Fort Bragg, and the beach up at Fort Bragg is like, in November, it's really cold. It's really, really cold. And they were throwing us in the water there. And the first day they had heat lamps around, and they had big robes and things like that. Man, they took me out second unit a couple of days later to shoot something else on that thing, and man, there was no heat lamp out there. It was freezing. Rob Boutine did the makeup on the thing, and he started a little late in the day, and they were about to shoot me, and I said, don't throw me in the water now. There's no light. They're reading the light meter with a flashlight. Don't throw me in the water. They said, we're the second unit. We have to get something on film.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. So that night we went. We shot a big action scene, and that worked out okay. And the next morning, I got up. I was pissed off. I was talking to Lynn about it. And I said, they're going to throw me in the water again because they didn't get the shot. She said, oh, don't look. Keep a cool head. You're right. Just keep a cool head. And I went to the production manager, Hunt Lowry, and I said, I woke him up. He was in his skivvies. He sat on his bed, lit a cigarette up. He said, yeah, what's up, Meegan? I said, Hunt, man, they're throwing me in that water, man. And the last time they threw me in the water before you sent me home a couple of weeks ago, I got a cold. I couldn't work for a couple of weeks. And he said, okay, so they got the shot today. I said, they didn't get the shot today. And he said, they assured me they got the shot. I said, Hunt, trust me, they didn't get the shot today. They're going to want to shoot it again. And he said, so what are you telling me? And I said, some stunt pay, maybe something. I'm working for nothing here. He said, well, what are you talking? And I said, $1,000. And he said, 500. And I said, sold. And they threw me in the water a couple of more times, and I got 500 in cash both times they threw me in the water. But it was like, oh yeah, that was a fun one. I was out to dinner with a buddy of mine, Don Maxwell, and his wife, and I knew him because I had a girlfriend who was in voiceover, and he was in voiceover with her. And we were all out, and he was out with his wife, and his wife and I were talking. I said, so, Don, what's he play? What kind of characters does he play? And she said, well, he usually plays rough guys, but he's been playing a lot of cops lately. But I like it when he plays rough guys. The other night we were watching this B movie that he did, and I said, what was the name of it? And she said, Humanoids From the Deep. And I said, my Humanoids From the Deep? And Don perked up, and he said, oh, no, you were in the remake of Humanoids of the Deep. I said, they remade Humanoids of the Deep? And he said, and they did. They made it with Bob Carradine. And anyway, I said, no, I was in the original one up in Fort Bragg. And Don and I were in 3 scenes together. We didn't recognize each other. It was funny.
That is pretty funny, yeah. Joe Dante, he turned down the direct Humanoids From the Deep because he had already done Piranha for Corman, and I guess he didn't want to do another Jaws type of, ripoff. Because Corman did 3 of them. He did Piranha, Humanoids From the Deep, and Up From the Depths, which was directed by Charles B. Griffith, who wrote Little Shop of Horrors and Bucket of Blood.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. No, and Gail Ann Hurd was she was like a producing assistant on it.
Oh,
not
yeah.
Production assistant, not a PA, but she was like the producer's assistant. And Jim Cameron was supposed to have been one of the humanoids.
Yeah. Yeah, Day Young, when she was in Rock and Roll High School, James Cameron was the production assistant, and years later, she was auditioning for Terminator. Cameron says to her, hey, do you remember me? I brought you coffee on the set of Rock and Roll High School. And she did remember him.
That's good.
Yeah. Doug McClure, oh my God, what a sweet guy I heard he was. I've interviewed his daughter.
Yeah, that was one of the looser sets because we had I don't remember what the beer was on that set, but if there was anybody that had a propensity toward drinking, which is probably the reason why John Maxwell and I didn't recognize each other, was because that set was like everybody was smashed half the time. Sorry, I hate to say that.
It's okay.
It's okay. Roger Corman's 100. He's not hiring me anyway. It's okay.
Yeah, you had your face ripped off. How did they do that?
Well, that was Rob Boutin, the guy who had done right after that. He did
The Howling.
The Howling, and he did that great transformation with Dee Wallace, and he did the makeup on the thing, and he and I worked on a couple of things together back to back, and he was a great guy. What a sweetheart. I don't know what's happened to him. I see Chris Walas working, but I don't see Rob working anymore.
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
You remember Linda Shane, who played Miss Salmon?
No, because those were insert shots. Those were later on. That was when they'd finished shooting the thing, and I went back and shot some other stuff later too. But I didn't meet Miss Shane. We shot down. They never got that shot, so they ended up taking us down to Laguna, and they shot the face ripping scene off in Laguna, and they finally got it there. But they also added another couple of scenes for Lynn Thiel and I, just to flesh our characters out a little bit.
Yeah. Well, Linda Shane, she wrote movies for Corman after this, and she works for Disney now. She cannot talk about any of the Corman movies publicly because they were R-rated. True story.
For whatever reason, I'm over at Disney. I live down the street from Disney, and I'm over at Disney every other day walking the line now. So it's. Yeah.
Do you remember anything? Do you remember anything from Blue Sunshine?
Yeah, just remember working with Meegan King, and he was a pretty nice guy, but weird.
Jeff Lieberman, I've interviewed him. He's weird.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't. You know what? I was in and out in about 2 hours in that thing. They hired me because I knew how to run the dialogue, and that's what they cared for. That was one of those utilitarian things that you do. But I remember Meegan King was a pretty nice guy.
The Waltons.
The Waltons got to shoot there. I shot a couple of things at Warner Brothers, and it was nice just working on those backlot sets because there's so much Hollywood history. I mean, it's where they shot. Oh my God! They shot The Music Man on the street where we had our big scene. And I did a couple of commercials there. My father had shot Finian's Rainbow there.
Oh, yeah.
With,
Coppola?
Francis Coppola. Yeah. Wow. Try and find that movie somewhere.
Yeah.
They don't show that on anything, man.
Yeah, I never see it.
No, you never see it. And Fred Astaire and Petula Clark are in it. It's like, you never see it.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah, Starsky and Hutch.
Starsky and Hutch, that was working with Barry Miller. And it was right before Barry Miller went off and did Saturday Night Fever. And he's a kid who fell off the bridge. Barry Miller, you'd recognize him. Coppola used him in Peggy Sue Got Married.
Oh, yeah.
He's the smart guy in Peggy Sue Got Married. And Barry was just, I just remember him talking like this, Harry, he's this New Yorker kid, and it's like, okay. He went to Fairfax High, that's what I remember.
Yeah, I remember the episode of The Love Boat you were on, Danny, Paul, Lee, and Kyle.
Danny, Paul, Lee, and Kyle, oh my God. That is, wow. That was one of the ones where we actually went on the cruise. One out of 3 of those shows went on the cruise just so that they could have the backgrounds on the ship or wherever they were going to be, and that they would shoot those exteriors. And I was on one, and we went on the 3-day thing down to Puerto Vallarta and Mazatlan, and the second day we were in Puerto Vallarta, and I guess it was a 7-day thing, but we were in Puerto Vallarta, and I went to the AD and I said, am I shooting today? And he said, you are off today. And I went, all right. And we went out, a bunch of us, and we got plastered. We just got plastered. And we went to Carlos O'Brien's in Puerto Vallarta, and we were drinking mezcal, and I ate the worm. We came back to the ship, and there was a call sheet under my door, and I had to work that night. And I was bad. I mean, I was sloppy. I mean, it was like, oh my God. I remember, jumping in the shower and staying in the shower for about an hour. And, I got out and I only had a line for the evening, and only I know I can see it, but thank God it passed all right. I was all right. But wow.
Yeah.
I was stunned. It was terrible.
That's a great guest starring episode because it's got Phil Foster, Ruth Gordon, Maureen McCormick, Tab Hunter, and Patty Duke.
Well, the only ones that we saw I saw Maureen and Bob Hedges, Robert Hedges, and the other two knuckleheads, and W.K. Stratton, and can't remember the other guy's name.
John Mark Robinson.
John Mark Robinson, who's on the San Pedro Beach Bums or whatever.
Oh yeah, I remember that show with Stuart Pankin and Chris Murney. I've talked to both those guys. Yeah.
Yeah, that was on for I think 5 episodes.
Yeah.
It lasted, just a little under what the Planet of the Apes TV show lasted.
Yeah. Stuart told me he's like his first time in Hollywood. He's like, I've arrived. I'm gonna get famous for being a beach bum, and then it got canceled.
Yeah, right off it got canceled. But they took a lot of us out for that one thing. They took 2 other shows out, and just those segments that they were trying to get the exteriors right. Mm-hmm. And Suzanne Summers was right before Three's Company was happening, and we went out and we all were social together, and she was great.
Yeah,
I really thought she was really smart, really much smarter than she came across as Chrissy Snow. I can tell you that much.
Nice. One Day at a Time. I love that show.
Yeah, One Day at a Time. I had the guest shot on that thing, and we went to the table reading on Wednesday, and I had like 3 good scenes, and came back on Thursday, and I had one line. Mm-hmm. And one line out of the whole thing. It was like, okay, I don't know what happened. It's what happens from time to time. You get cut. And
really? You didn't meet Norman Lear?
I did meet Norman Lear, but Danny Bonaducci's father was the writer on the thing, and
oh wow,
he was a good guy, Joe Bonaducci. And I said, what happened, Joe? And he said, Bonnie didn't like you. I was like, what? I guess it was Bonnie Franklin didn't like me, so okay. It was a character that was coming on kind of strong. Yeah.
You did this sci-fi western pilot called Starstruck.
Well, it was the answer to it was a family show for the Star Wars people, and I like a lot of people, read for Star Wars, and a couple of years later when I was cast in that thing, and I was happy that Mark Hamill got the job because Mark and I had done a couple of commercials together, and I liked him. I wasn't going to get it. I was glad he got it. And so this was just, it was going to be Luke Skywalker and Han Solo, in space, and with a father who was Beeson Carroll. And it was like, okay,
yeah,
well, it was a lot of fun. And Arthur Kopit, a famous, stage, wrote a lot of stage plays, wrote it. And looked like they were putting something behind it, looked like it was going to go. And right up until the last minute, it didn't go.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, that was disappointing, but you have that.
It's an interesting premise, at least.
Yeah, it was fine. And if it had gone, I'd have, I don't know what would have happened. Who knows? That doesn't matter. But right about that same time, the reason why I was feeling my oats and I got cast in that thing. I was on Days of Our Lives for about 7 months, and I did about 35 of those shows in 7 months. And I worked opposite. It was the time that Luke and Laura on General Hospital were getting hot, so they wanted to try and do a Luke and Laura type line on Days of Our Lives, and I was 24, and Tracy Bregman, the girl that they had me hooked up with, was 14. the same way that Jeannie Francis was, very young for Tony Carey, and so that was where I learned the most. That was a great job to have. Really loved it.
So what made you get behind the camera and do stuff behind the scenes?
I had a car accident in '81.
Wow.
And I messed my face up, and I thought it was really cool. I looked in the mirror the next morning and said, good, now I'll be the character actor I always wanted to be. Well, I wasn't making money as a character actor. I was making money as a full-faced, Ronnie Howard type kid, you know. So, and I was out of it, and just it was tough to get back in. It was really tough. I had done like 45 commercials in 5 years, and I was a commercial actor. That's how I was really making my money. And I couldn't make commercials anymore because I had this big scar on my face. So it was like, it finally, went away with age. But, I had a great plastic surgeon, and, it went away pretty well. But you're out of the limelight for a year healing when you're 27, 28 years old. And you know what? It's not the time to be out of the limelight. People are coming out, people are getting out of college and they're having careers, and I just kind of fell by the wayside.
Oh, that's unfortunate. I'll tell you, I didn't damage my face when I had my car crash, but I'll tell you, that crash aged me rapidly. I look at least 10 years older than I actually am. It gave me so much stress.
It was fine. You know what? And I had to learn stuff, and I started going behind because I had to make money. So I had a couple of jobs, and I was working on a thing for the Playboy channel.
Oh, is that Erotic Images?
Erotic Images with Marilyn Chambers.
Yeah.
and it was like all of these straight actors working with Marilyn Chambers, and she was a hot mess. She was a total mess on the set. And my character, I died of a heart attack raping her. So I was out of the show, and I went to the producer, who was a friend of mine, a guy named John Ward, and I said, John, anybody hiring around here? He said, what do you mean? I said, I can do some PA work. I know a set pretty well. He said, I don't know. He turned me on to George Buck Flower.
Oh, yeah.
And John Goff's buddy.
Yep.
And Buck was this guy who talked like this,
Yep.
I said,
the homeless guy in Back to the Future.
Yeah, and he's also in Them. He has a good part in Them. Mm-hmm. Or They. Is that the one with what's his name?
You talking about They Live?
They Live. That's it.
With Roddy Piper.
Yeah. He plays the bum in that thing that turns around in the end, and he's got all the money or whatever it is. Anyway. So I went to Buck, and I said, I didn't know Buck well. I just knew him. I said, Buck, you hiring for any PAs? And he said, you don't hire actors for PAs. And I said, you know what? It's Christmas time. I need the work. I said, well, what are you paying? And he said, we're paying like $250 a week. I said, I tell you what, if you're not embarrassed to be paying me $250 a week next week after you've hired me, then fire me. And so he hired me on, and I became Marilyn Chambers, holding her hand, because she came in every morning. She was having problems with substances at that time.
Yeah.
And I would get her ready for camera and make sure that she was lying perfect and have all of her stuff. And the next week they doubled my salary, and I went into production for a little while, and I really enjoyed it, except for it's not fun to work with cheesy producers.
Yeah.
It really isn't fun to work for them. They're really kind of slimy, and that's all I was working for. For a couple of years. Buck turned me on to a lot of jobs. He got me a job as a production coordinator, production manager on things for a while. I wrote a couple of scripts with him, and then I got to meet John Goff, who's what a great guy.
Yeah.
What a talented guy.
Yeah.
And got to know him a little bit, and then I worked for working for Joe Shaftel, who had been the producer of The Untouchables here. He burnt all of his bridges, and I don't mean the movie The Untouchables, the one was a television series.
Yeah.
And he had burnt all his bridges here. He went over to Europe to work as a producer, and he burned all of his bridges there, and he was back, and we were shooting a thing with Britt Eklund.
Yeah.
And Ed Burns. I don't know if you knew who Ed Burns was. But
Kooky.
Kooky, that's right.
Yeah.
77 Cents. And, I had a decent part in the thing, but I was also the production coordinator on.
Yeah.
And Ed was grumbling about not being paid. And I said, well, let me go look into that for you. And, we had lost our backer 3 days before we were going into a 3-week shoot.
Yeah.
And damn, if Joe Shaftel shot for no money for 3 weeks. He talked to everybody. He was the smoothest operator of all time. Kind of made me not want to work in show business anymore. And then I went and then I worked in the art department for about 10 years. And you got a family, you got a life, you got to pay for stuff, and it's like the acting stuff. I had a couple of years that I got to go out on the road and do summer stock.
Mm-hmm.
That was fun. And that was great, but it wasn't paying any bills. And you have to get serious after a while. So I kind of gave up that dream. And then later on, I wrote a one-man show. I wrote a couple of one-man shows, and I've got like 10 different characters that I'm working on. That's what I've been shooting since the beginning of the pandemic.
I know.
So I'll let you know.
You sent me that picture, the new Homeless Valley dude.
The new Homeless Valley dude, man, and he's quite a character, and it's he talks about growing up in the valley in the 60s, what the whole thing was like, and there are some pieces I really love, and right now there are 32 of them, and they'll probably end up being about 36 3-minute pieces, and one of them has a string together that it'll be 21 minutes if I put it all together that way. But
nice.
I'm just going to take it to the media and see what the media has to say about it.
Nice. Real quick, you did art direction on Muppets Tonight in the 90s?
Well, no, I was in the art department on that. I was a set dresser on that, and I was a set dresser on, I can't remember a thing with, anyway. It's gone. The Muppets Tonight was great. I love the Muppets Tonight, and I would have become a set dresser, but they work 14, 16-hour days, and it's like nobody survives that very well. It's not really easy on the bones.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when it was on. I mean, to me, the Muppets were never the same again after Henson died. It just seems to me like it's a Disney product and just nothing more now. It's
Brian Henson had was at the helm at this point, and he was an interesting guy. I liked him, but he was no Jim Henson, but we still had Frank Oz around, and you'd see a lot of the Kevin, what's his name?
Kevin Clash.
Kevin Clash was around, and there are a lot of people that were doing those puppets for years. They were really talented people. And set dressing was not a fun thing to do for that show because you had to find stuff that was 3/8 scale for everything.
Right.
And, besides little kids' toys, things don't really come in 3/8 scale. You gotta, It was weird. It was kind of fun. But that's,
Have you ever thought about writing a memoir?
I'm writing, not my memoir. I'm kind of writing my dad's story because it's about the guys that came back from World War II and got the GI Bill, and they were in New York, and they were the guys that wanted to be actors, and it's like, the Jack Wardens, the Charles Durnings.
All the character actors that served in the war.
Yeah, my father was in one of Strasberg's classes, and they were coming away from the class, and there was this guy that every week used to come in, little roly-poly guy, used to come in and do Shakespeare every week, and he'd do, the great ones, and it would always culminate in him crying. No matter whether it was appropriate for the piece or not, the guy always ended up crying somehow. And my dad did some live TV with the guy, and later on, but they were coming out of class one day, and he said, "Right, I don't know what to do. I'm 24 years old. I'm a little roly-poly guy, and nobody wants to hire me. I don't think I'm ever going to work." And my father said he came that close to telling Rod Steiger to give it up.
Wow. Wow. So he came up with Rod Steiger.
Rest in peace.
Oh yeah. He came up with. He was in the second company of Streetcar Named Desire. And he was on the road with Anthony Quinn and Uta Hagen.
Wow.
And Jack Palance was Anthony Quinn's understudy.
Wow.
So it was a colorful lot of people, and so my dad ended up ended up doing Streetcar Named Desire.
Did your dad know Lila Garrett?
I don't.
Her daughter Eliza is married to Eric Roberts, and they've both been on the show. And Lila, she dated Rod Steiger when they were in their college days or something.
Wow. No, I don't know Lila Garrett. No, the only Garrett I knew was Betty. That my dad knew was Betty Garrett.
Oh yes, of course. But Lila Garrett, she passed away a couple of years ago. She was the first female writer in the history of television.
Really?
Yeah.
What show?
Oh, so many. And she later became a director for TV Movie of the Weeks and stuff. But she was writing for I think some of the early Universal shows.
Huh.
Yeah, this is 1950 or something. Yeah.
Yeah. My dad ended up out in the country home out here in Woodland Hills, the Motion Picture Fund.
Mm-hmm.
A great place for actors to end up. And the crew that he used to hang out with was Mark Rydell and Helen Reddy.
Right.
Before Helen Reddy totally lost her mind. She got no. I mean, she got Alzheimer's. She totally lost her. Yeah, boy, how my dad didn't know Lila Garrett. I mean, my God. Yeah. I'm looking at this IMDb. She's all over the place. Yeah, she wrote a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Meegan, I thank you so much for coming on today and sharing all these great stories. I hope you have a great rest of your summer, and be safe out there. And I can't wait till those characters, get released to the world after all this strike stuff is done.
I will let you know as soon as they come out, Tommy. I promise.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. This was great.
My pleasure, sir. Have a great day.
Okay, you take care.
Bye-bye. Well, there you have it. Meegan King, Ain't he a cool dude? Oh my God, great stories there. I'm so glad that we had that chat today. Real nice guy. And also, I forgot to mention at the top of the hour, happy birthday, Suze Lanier, a multiple-time guest who I adore. You all know her from The Hills Have Eyes. Happy birthday, Suze. Love you, darling. Well, until next time, this is Tommy Throwback Kovac saying, there's no shame in living in the past, because the present sucks. Later, dudes.